All right, Susanna, as the director of The Night Manager, you're doing this big 6-hour miniseries adaptation of a John le Carre novel. Tell us how you got involved with it.
Well, I read the very first version of the first episode that David Farr had written, and I was like, I have to do this. Firstly, because I've always been crazy about John le Carre, and I've always been sort of secretly envious of anyone who got to deal with his material. And then I just found it and I read the novel a long time ago when it came out. And I just thought it was an amazingly challenging, exciting, and thrilling world. So I did a real huge, big effort in trying to convince the producers that I was the right one for it.
Well, was it easy making the transition into television? Because obviously you've got a lot of experience in the feature film world. Was it a big leap going into television?
You know, I've been looking to do television for a little while because, I mean, the writing in television at the moment is excellent. And there's just so many amazing television shows. And I found myself almost being more tempted to watch television than watch movies. You know, when I was kind of looking at stuff, I kind of suddenly realized I've been now watching 40 hours of television, and I have reluctantly watched like probably through 3 or 4 hours or 3 or 4 movies. So I was tempted by it, and I found it incredibly satisfying and challenging and fun to do 6 hours as opposed to do 2 hours. It's big. I mean, it's huge, and we were shooting all over the place, and you know, it was kind of quite a demanding thing. But doing 6 hours for a director is very, very interesting. It's like writing it's like dealing with a proper big fat novel as opposed to doing a short story. I love short stories, but there's something about the detailing, the layering, the way you can deal with minor characters, really give minor characters space, which is so satisfying in doing TV, and which in this particular show have been so joyful.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk a bit more about mounting this epic production, because I mean, it is, in the first episode alone, you've got so many different locations all over the globe. Talk about just planning this out, this big epic 6-hour thing.
Well, I mean, I want to say that it was a logistic nightmare, and it was also a logistic nightmare which didn't become any less complicated when it turned out that Olivia Colman, who plays Bier, was pregnant. And so we didn't just have a very short window where Tom Hiddleston and Hugh Laurie was available. We also had the fact that we were now having to a pregnant, very important character who very soon wouldn't be allowed to travel. And we started shooting in Switzerland, that we shot in England, in London, and in Devon, and then we went to Morocco and shot in Marrakesh and outside of Marrakesh, and then went to Spain and shot in Mallorca. So it was without any further complication, it would have been a logistical nightmare. And then we just add things, and but you know, I think in a way, as a director, what you do is you just kind of go for the best possible artistic solution, and then you just kind of want to make it happen, as opposed to worrying about it's not happening, or as opposed to worrying about things being difficult. So I also had I had a number of locations where I was like, for example, the restaurant on Mallorca in episode 2 where he's being beaten up, which sort of starts his voyage into the world of Roba. Jonathan Pyne's voyage into the world of Roba. That restaurant is a very tiny restaurant, which basically only has not a dirt road, but a very small road leading down to it, and the big trucks couldn't go down there. So I had like a whole production crew going, really? So you want to shoot like a very, very big, very important scene in a place where we can't take the trucks down? And I was like, yeah, That's right, and and I'm you know, I'm glad because it looks beautiful and it works really well. But yes, it was a complicated setup, but incredibly rewarding to do.
Well, visually, it looks so great. So talk about working with your DP and your production designer, costumes, all those people to help make sense of all these locations. And I mean, you're jumping forward in time also. So talk about your visual attack of it.
Well, you know, the whole thing, the whole shot is shot like one long film. So we'd be doing a scene from episode 2 in the morning, and then a scene from episode 6. You know, everything was kind of random the way you shoot a film. So we have 6 hours of material, and basically my brief to the whole visual department was that it needs to be as sexy as, and it needs to be as sort of, everything needs to be seductive. And it wasn't just because I wanted the look, it was also because it was part of the story. Because the story of Pine gets involved in Roper's world, and what you as an audience is sort of, the tension is about, does he get corrupted, does he get seduced by this world, or does he maintain his moral integrity, or will the mission be compromised? And I think as an audience, you all the time sit and kind of wonder where that there's a lot of tension in that whole thematic beat, and that can only work if that world is utterly seductive. So the location needed to be really seductive and beautiful and lavish, and the costumes needs to be very specific. And I also had I've always had a feeling that, you know, when you depict, often when we filmmakers or television makers depict wealthy people, we fall back on cliches. We think wealthy people look in a specific way, and I wanted to avoid the cliches. I wanted to really have the lavishness, but I didn't want it to look the sort of the cliche or the stereotype. Like I didn't want Roper's girlfriend, who is played by Elizabeth Debicki, to be the stereotype, which is why Elizabeth Debicki was a wonderful choice in that respect, because she's beautiful, but she's definitely not your kind of standard trophy girlfriend. Mm-hmm. And so everything, that was a brief for everyone, production design, for DOP, and for costume.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the actors, because this is a really great cast. Start with Tom Hiddleston.
Well, Tom Hiddleston is he's almost like a spy himself. He's got this sort of weird, he's very enigmatic, and he will be totally present in the scene, and he will be completely, and there will always be a part of him which he's never going to reveal. And so he's a kind of a perfect spy. And you don't really know you like him, and you think he's very sexy and handsome and beautiful, but I think there is a part of him where you're a little bit uncertain about whether to trust him completely.
Right. So Hugh Laurie.
Hugh Laurie, the worst man. Hugh Laurie plays Richard Roper, the worst man in the world, as he's described in the book. So the worst man in the world in our show is the most charming man in the world. I mean, Hugh Laurie is the most charming man in the world. And having that cocktail of someone this charming being this evil is quite, there's something irresistible about that. And, you know, I think that was, you know, we really wanted that. And I think that's also part of that whole thing. He's a guy whom you want to be seated at dinner. You want to be seated next to him. You know, you want to be holidaying in his house. So it's making that, you know, it's having this really charismatic man, and then knowing that his world is just so vicious and dark.
Yeah, I mean, you're almost rooting for him to get away with all this stuff. He is very charming, yeah.
Yeah.
You guys did a Q&A at the Egyptian, I think it was, all of you.
Yeah.
I was there for that, and really is the most charming person in the world.
Yeah, he is. He is.
Yeah. And the scenes between the two of them are so great. You know, this sort of like cat and mouse back and forth. As a director, is it a joy to do those kinds of scenes?
It's a joy. And that cat and mouse game is just like what sort of you know, before I started the series, I wrote for a little, I can't remember what I wrote it for. I had to write like a few lines about what is sort of intriguing about this, and I wrote exactly that expression. It's a cat and mouse game between those two men. You know, there is a love, there's weird, I mean, not a sexual love affair, but there's a kind of weird love affair going on. There is a lot of sort of secret hatred. I mean, there's so many things going on, and they're so, until a certain point, they are so polite and charming with one another, and there's so many things going on underneath.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. You brought up Olivia Colman earlier. What if you talk a bit more about her? That, correct me if I'm wrong, but that part in the book was originally for a man, wasn't it?
That part in the book is Leonard Burr.
Right.
And in the series, it's Angela Burr. And yes, that's a man. And on that very first version of the very first episode that I read, Burr was still a man. And then the producer, Stephen Garrett, told me that the producers had discussed whether to make this character into a woman. And I was like, yes. I think that's also, I thought it was fantastic taking, you know, by updating the whole piece, then taking it out of the public school white male world was you needed to do that in order to update it. And I was at the jury in Sundance where Olivia Colman got a prize for Tyrannosaurus in 11. Right. And ever since, I kind of thought, I need to work with her. And here was my chance.
And you mentioned Elizabeth Debicki as well.
Yeah.
She's sort of a newcomer to the world of television, isn't she? Or,
I mean, yes, she's done things, but she was a kind of relatively, I mean, compared to sort of the very experienced,
right.
Yeah. And she just totally seamlessly just melted into the whole thing. She's such a amazingly talented and so beautiful actress. She used to be a dancer, and you sense that, and like all her movements has this sort of elegant, effortless sort of. There's a bit of a dance, like everything she does is a bit like she dances.
Mm-hmm. And what's so great about her character too is that it's the sort of thing that I think in a lesser movie could be just eye candy, you know.
Yeah.
But she's really given a wide range, you know, and an arc to it as well. Like, so after you've assembled all of this stuff, talk about the editing of it, because I mean, you have the individual episodes, but you know, it's all a part of this 6-hour thing, right? So how do you edit something like this?
You know, I did shoot it like a long film, and that my whole sort of intention was we need to address it like a long film. So yes, each episode needs to have a satisfying arc, but so does each act of a movie, basically. And then we did quite thorough editing. I mean, we did actually change the structure, particularly in the first couple of episodes, quite radically from its original. We were very keen. I mean, I think part of what I told, my caption for the whole thing is that all of these characters hide something. None of these characters are ever open with one another. There's always a secret with each character. There's always like something which is very, very secretive. And that was a kind of mantra for the actors, but it was also a kind of weird a mantra for the editing. So we wanted to tell the story so it caught you and intrigued you and seduced you, but never tell more. So, you know, and it was funny, I had my mom after episode 5, I had my mom calling me and kind of going, I am your mother. you have to tell me. And I was like, no, mommy, I'm so sorry. I'm not going to.
That's funny. I wonder, when you're constructing something this big and this complicated, and that is so reliant on, John le Carre is great in his storytelling, these complex mysteries. Is it easy to lose sight of, what am I trying to say here? Like, is it?
I know what you're saying.
Right.
I know what you're saying, because you're saying, do you find yourself making logistical mistakes? Like, do you find yourself making, because it's shot that way, that you've suddenly, there's something that is like some kind of oversight, which is basically my biggest fear throughout the entire shoot, because I improvise a bit. I'll take the scene and it doesn't play, and then I change dialogue, and then, and so having a certain sense of liberty with the material, and yet having the logistical sort of demands that sort of show has. I did sleep and I did work, but I did not think of anything else for the entire period, because that was, I was terrified that I'd make some kind of mistake, and only realizing in editing, going, oh,
right.
And so I was basically super, super alert all the time, as were the producers, as were Hugh and Tom, and so I think we were all holding hands in sort of making sure that this wasn't happening.
Right. So it sounds like you really enjoyed your foray into television. Any plans to go back to it, either here or in Denmark?
Yeah, I'm going to be doing more television.
Mm-hmm. Anything on the horizon right now that you can talk about?
I don't know. No. But I will be doing more. This has been way too much fun to not do more of it.
Right. So lastly, I want to ask you, since we're an awards website, your film In a Better World won the Oscar a couple years ago for foreign language film. I wonder what that kind of recognition meant for you.
Firstly, it's incredibly wonderful having an Oscar, and having, on the first night I put it next to me on my pillow, and and then, I think it's a kind of, it's a sort of a stamp of quality. It does open doors. It does mean that you've actually achieved something which is sort of universally recognized. It does not mean that whatever you do next comes lightly, or is less of a pressure, or you can, basically, it does not mean that you at any point can be slack or arrogant about the material you're dealing with. So yes, it's wonderful and it opens door, but make no mistakes. Whatever you do, you have to be just as diligent and ambitious and thorough with. So it's great, but no, it's not like a blank check.
Of course. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on your work. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a great day.
Thank you.